What's up, Liron here, and in this episode of Painting Masters, we'll review works by Trevor Chamberlain. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Painting Masters. Today we'll be looking at works by Trevor Chamberlain, a British watercolor painter, works both in oils and watercolor. He has this style that I'm starting to develop a love for, not a knack for, of many British painters that work in both oils and watercolor. I love his approach to both. His oil paintings are fantastic. He has this level of impressionism that I enjoy so much, and I'd actually love to see some of his work or works to that alike in museums. If you have any recommendations, let me know in a comment below. What else did I want to talk about? So one interesting thing that I read about him is at, I believe, the summer of 1974, or just in 1974, he taught himself for the entire year how to paint in watercolor. He's mostly self-taught, even though he has formal education. So he taught himself watercolor painting through, that's what he says, through sheer perseverance and just learning from masters. And sheer perseverance sounds really befitting the watercolor medium. Just so much challenge and so many things to learn when working with it. So in any case, I really hope you enjoyed this one. And before we get started, I just wanted to say that I'm really trying to grow this channel. I've had a bit of a plateau and I'm trying to bring it back up and just reach more people and inspire and help more, because all of the videos here are completely free. So if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate if you like it, if you comment on it, if you subscribe to the channel. If you still haven't, I have a lot of similar videos like this one. And with that being said, let's get started and look at Trevor Chamberlain's paintings. Okay, so let's get started. Trevor Chamberlain, and I'm really excited because his paintings are just amazing, and I'm going to start with a bang here. This first one I absolutely love. I love this look of fog and mist, and there's smoke coming out of the little chimneys here in the village. The way he created this beautiful soft impression is just beyond me, and I don't do oils, so I don't have much to comment in terms of technique or anything like that. What I will direct your attention to is the composition. That's something that's always interesting to me. There are several points of interest throughout this painting, and he actually does something really smart of tying them together. So at first look, and this is something I love, you see how the horizon kind of is in the middle on the left part of the painting, and then on the right it's more towards the third. So there's a bit of a balancing factor here. Now, there are, when I look at it, really 3 points of interest that my mind keeps circling through, and that is, of course, this tower here of this church. Then we've got this small red structure, building, house, whatever, and then there's this green foliage, tree, whatever, shrub, whatever that is, and it works so beautifully well in the way of, and this is really interesting actually, now that I think about it. This one's more orange-ish, this is green, and this is blue. It's not really purple, but there's a nice balance of colors and composition. There's also these tree branches here kind of guiding you into the picture and into the painting. And notice the difference immediately. When you look at an oil painting, you get all of these details because the medium is opaque and it allows you to add highlights on top of shadows. You can just put white on top of black, or and nothing really here is completely white or black, at least most of it not, just the fog and all of this. The main light value here is yellow, and I love the way he approached this one. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. I could just stare at this. This is the thing. I could just stare at it for hours. The softness of the background here, the just beautiful rendering of the scene. Next up, we have another one that I love. And again, if you take a few steps back, it just looks so beautiful, like almost like a picture, but our eyes still do some of the work, which I love. This is just the holy grail for me, is really Impressionism. I love it the most. having the viewer take part in the painting is something that I really, really admire and appreciate and enjoy taking an active part of the painting by interpreting it myself. You know, there's some street lights here, the tree, the shadows going on. But if you look at the main large shapes, they're very interesting. You get this huge green shape in the background, bluish, muted orange at some points, green. Then we've got this shape of the shadow here all throughout, and this kind of brings us also into the painting. Then we have this light shape here, and the sunlit road with some people. There's this kind of a truck in the middle ground, and it's half into the shadow, half outside the shadow. The car here, it's just fantastic way of creating this. And notice how the values are really on point. And this, for example, it would have been or could have been so easy to mistakenly make this super dark, the trees in the background, and create this punchy effect. But he doesn't do that. He reserves the darks, and it seems like there's a lot of mid values that I love. So he has also watercolor works, as I mentioned, and these are, I find, really interesting because it's so simple. They're simple. The magic really is in simplicity. I don't necessarily like the colors of this one. It's a bit too much sepia for me, or whatever paint was used for it. Maybe a bit of burnt sienna as well. But the simplification of the scene is something genius, really. There are two main boats here, a few structures in the background, and we have this. It just reads well. You know, you can tell what you're looking at. There's this maybe crane here in the background. The rooftop of the building is halfway kind of showing, and it's well lit. There's tons of boats here in the background. I believe these are boats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then some very major simplification in the background. We have this the edge of the water body, whatever that is here, few ropes and wires, very classic of this kind of scene. And it just works so well. And it goes to show you that a lot of the magic happens in the interpretation of the scene. For example, you could paint this pretty easily. The genius part is actually dumbing down the scene into this, which is very challenging. This is something you get better at every single day. You never stop. And notice this one. This is really, like, if you don't like your watercolors or something, if you're frustrated or struggle, take a look at this one. It's so simple. But, you know, you could say it's like children's painting, but the composition is there. It's very smart. The way things are arranged, the different elements, they're very smart, and everything still reads very well. So it really works. And it goes to show you don't have to go very complex. This really reminds me of Edward Seago, Edward Wesson, the kind of very simplistic approach to watercolor painting, which I love. And this is a good study to do on location. Then you can take that back home, take a picture or two, and create a more detailed work when you're in the studio or at home and you have more time. But outside, this is a really good way of quickly getting the impression of what you're looking at and then moving on later on and further developing it. Another watercolor, this is one of my favorites actually. I absolutely love everything about it. Very minimal, messing around with the paint, not too much. Nothing is overworked here. You see there's a sky wash in the ground. Then he put in the main boat, put in a secondary boat, put in some piles of rubble and stuff like that, a few wires running around, a lot of interest in the shadow. Take a look at this, some transition from warm to cool. There's a lot of blue at the edge of the shadow here, and it's just fantastic. It works really well. There's a bit of blue here, and it's so simple. This is really one of my favorites. Goes to show you, as long as you practice your ability to interpret the scene and simplify it, nothing really is impossible, and you can portray a very complex scene very simply. Next up, we're going to go back to some oils. Another one I love. I love how you can see the texture of the canvas here. I just like it, the style, the way he approached it. Maybe it's the gleam or the sheen on the paper. I don't know if it's actually showing through, but I just love it. And notice how there is a lot of variation. It's not like watercolor painting where you do the light transitions, but it's pretty close. If you look at here, if we zoom in at the very background of these houses, you get a few small details for the chimneys. You have this bluish color, and then it goes down to more gray, I would say. Then it warms up a bit next to these buildings. Then it goes back to green. He repeats this kind of orange all throughout the scene. There's on the chimneys here, on the rooftops here, on the trees in the foreground. It's just such an interesting interpretation of the scene, and the way he conveys the light and shadow here work really well. And I want you to notice one last thing. This shadow on the road, again, it's really easy to push these to be too dark, but it's just the right amount of darkness. Same for this one, same for these shadows. And then you can really put in the punchy shadow next to the, let's say, on the wall of this house, and in this house, also in the bottom left corner, and that'll really bring it out. But if you push the darkness too much in all the other places, it doesn't mean much. It's the middle values, middle to dark values, that really push the darks to look darker and make the lights really shine. So I love the way he treated this. This looks like a double-floored bus. I don't know what you'd call these, but very interesting. Love this scene. I love this color here, the muted blue on the roof here, and the way it connects to the wall. This is just beautiful, beautiful rendering. And another scene in watercolor. I just thought I'd mix it up a little. This is another one that I really like, a bit more simplistic. Just the sky. There's a very pale wash for the background here. Probably he left this area almost untouched. That's probably the initial wash. I mean, all of the water. And then there's this land mass here, a bit in the background. Notice how he simplified the boat significantly. There's this one main boat that you can really see the details. Two more here, another one there, and then all the background is just random masts and stripes that make you feel like there are boats there when there's actually nothing there. Now, one more thing I want you to pay attention to, and this is something that I always struggle with, and it's just hard to do in art, and that is to avoid any patterns, make everything as random as possible. And if you look at the boats, their arrangement is so freaking random. You got, okay, so you have, none of the spaces are equal. You have this boat. This one's a little farther back. This one's a little closer. This one is a different distance from the edge of the paper as it is from this. We have a group of two boats there, and then a few in the background, and it really leads your eye into there's kind of an S or Z composition here, or C, you could call it, whatever you want, but it leads your eye gently throughout the painting like a snake almost, and you just hop on each and every boat with your eyes all the way to the background, all the way to this lovely, I guess, sunlit land, whatever there is there. I love how all the paper, it looked like it was in quite an angle, so the paper went down, at least for the skies. It's kind of melted downwards. At the bottom here, he really was able to preserve the more, probably it was more leveled and not at an angle, the paper itself. So absolutely love this one, and the arrangement of the boats here really make this painting amazing. This is a completely different one, and you can see how, I don't know if it's the varnishing material or whatever that is, but I love the texture here, and I love how, and this is a very, I think at least a very challenging scene to paint, because what happens is you have a lot of darks, and then the variations in the darks, and whenever that happens, that's very hard for me to portray. So you have this few light areas, the worker, which isn't that light as well, the boat, but then everything around it, except for the window, is just, there's a lot of variation in the darks here. Then there are a few diagonal windows here, so it's probably a shed with kind of a diagonal rooftop, with windows through which the light shines through. Very, very smart painting, in my opinion, and very technically challenging. At least for me, these are a big challenge. And I don't know how challenging it is in oil compared to water, because in oil you can get the variations of shadows and compare and see what it looks like. In watercolor, if you lose the lights, you lost them. So it's a bit of a different process. I guess every medium has its own, advantages, disadvantages, challenges. This I love. It's just nothing. There's nothing here. There's literally nothing, and it still is something. So you have this kind of a building. It looks like, I don't know, maybe a shed or something that's not that concrete, I would say. And then you get this thing here. Is it a flag? Is it it looks like a wind-powered something. I don't know. what you'd even call it, but it just works. The magic is in simplicity. A few bushes here, a few branches coming out of them. You don't need anything, like really nothing. There's this shadow and a very clever, this tree and a very clever shadow here, a bit of yellow, green, and blue, and he does keep a bit of red here, just because I think if you drop the red, it will lose some of its interest. So you do need a few colors to get the harmony to look right, but still works very well. A bit of dry brush here on the water, just to bring out some gleam of the sunlight hitting it. Another watercolor that I really like, and again, magic is in simplicity. This looks like Venice. There's really not a lot here, just a bridge, a few boats, some poles in the water. One thing I would say that I love in this one is the diagonal shadows. So you get a lot of these diagonal shadows. Some of these were created with a dry brush, and it really helps in conveying the direction of the light. The water feels really affected by the light conditions, especially in this green area here at the close to the top left area. You get this green part that's very well lit, and you can almost feel the light hitting the water surface. I absolutely love this. It applies to the boats as well here. The light just shines through, and the diagonal shape of the line is just beautiful. Very simple. Again, I really want to make a study of this one. It's so simple, but it works really well. And nailing the values down, nailing the drawing down, and it's just all you need, really. I'm going to make a study of this one today. I decided right now. So yeah, another beautiful oil scene. And again, with his muted orange and green color palette that I love. And the people here, they're just stains of very gentle paint. And you can tell here there's a woman sitting down. Maybe she has a kid with her, maybe not. A few people walking around. This may be older lady. I don't know exactly. You don't know the details, but you can feel the scene for sure. What I don't like as much in oils is this example. For example, this area, the way it just looks in oils, it's very blurry. I like when there is some sharpness in the foreground, at least. But because it's in the shadow, it still works well. I like the look of oils when it looks more like this than the way it does when it's here. I can't really explain it, unfortunately, better than that. I don't know how to, but in any case, I love this one as well. Notice how this is probably white, but because of the... or no, you know what? It could be blue. I don't know. But it's just a fantastic painting. Next up, we have this watercolor that I saved, I think, the last one. Yeah. So we have one more after this one. And notice the contrast of the sky with the building. This is actually one of my most favorite light and shadow conditions. They're very rare here, at least in Israel, but when they occur, I absolutely love this. And that is when the sky is a bit gloomy, but you do have a strong sunlight hitting the ground. So you get this fascinating contrast with very gloomy sky and very dark sky, but still sharp light hitting the walls and the rooftops, which I absolutely love. So this is one thing that I wanted to mention regarding this scene and show you. Again, the way he pulls you into the scene, there's this curvy line that goes from the bottom right corner and all the way to the right here, with all of the buildings and all of the washes, just one big merged wash of green, and then some blue, and then some orange, and then some, just a lot of variation that are interesting. He does keep the foreground interesting, so you have some wet in wet, some rocks, some stones. The boat itself is in the foreground, some interesting shadows in the water. The way he built this scene is just beautiful. And notice the the simplest rule of composition kind of applies here, and that is the rule of thirds. Again, there's nothing set in stone when it comes to composition, but you get it. The boat isn't in the center. I always say, if you don't know nothing about composition, here's the one thing you should try and embrace, and that is avoid the middles. So if you have some object you want to put in the scene, don't put it in the dead center. Put it a bit to the left or a bit to the right. Play around with it, both for horizontal objects. If you want to place a piece of land in the ocean, put it 2/3 down or maybe a little under the middle. And if you keep avoiding the middles, you get an interesting composition. Now, you have a lot of ways of breaking this rule, so-called rule, but that's a good place to start. So in any case, yeah, I love this. There's a guy here pushing a log or something. I don't know. It reads so beautiful. I love this kind of thing. So next up, and this is the one I wanted to finish this episode with. fantastic. Everything I love in a painting. Strong contrasts, cityscape, which is my favorite. A lot of I don't even know how to interpret this because it's so beautiful. I just look at it and enjoy it. And you know what? You don't have to interpret everything. Just look at this painting, enjoy it. One thing I will say is this, I don't know, sun under foggy conditions or even moonlight, the moon starting to show, is fantastic. The main center of attention, a few buildings here in the background to put this main building in perspective, and it's just fantastic. So I really enjoyed this. As you can see, I have a lot of passion for this kind of style. So much passion that sometimes I'm at awe and I don't have words to describe it, but I think that's only natural. Thank you so much for joining me in this little tour in Trevor Chamberlain's works. And this is it. Now it's time to conclude this episode. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed this episode and seeing Trevor's spectacular work. Really, one of my favorites is the first one, the foggy kind of scene. I really love these kinds of impressionistic paintings that are so close to just being really realistic when you look at them from afar and even from up close sometimes. So really enjoyed this one, and there's a lot to learn, I think, from him in terms of just good art. His art is good, his paintings, his composition. You can learn a lot from doing studies of people like that, which is something I'm starting to do a little more. I'm going through these time periods where I focus more on my own style, my own art, develop my individuality, and then I take a break and do a lot of master studies, a lot of things like this. And this is it. I will see you again in another vid real soon.